The dragon had not spoken in 400 years, not when the cities fell silent, not when the last of her kind was hunted across the stars, not even when the galaxy itself begged for mercy. She had folded her wings and settled into the hollow heart of a dead world, buried herself beneath oceans of dust, and turned her gaze inward to the long, slow dream of forgetting. There, she thought, no one could ever find her. No one ever would. But humans are inconvenient that way. The expedition had been small. Too small, really, to matter. A single freighter-turned research vessel, the Aurora's Folly, crewed by scavengers, exiles, and idealists. The galaxy had gone quiet after the war. Too many empires had burned out their fuel. Too many species had given up the urge to look beyond their own ruins. But humans never stopped looking. They never stopped digging. On the 14th day of the survey, they found her. The scanners registered it first. A faint anomaly beneath the crust of Vera Prime, a world long marked as sterile and uninhabitable. A sphere of dense metallic matter embedded miles below the surface, dormant but intact. At first, the team thought it was a lost weapon, one of the planet crackers the ancient fleets had used when the galaxy still bled. But the readings didn't match. The object wasn't dead metal. It pulsed. They drilled for 6 days before the first glimpse of her scales appeared through the dust. Commander Isla Wren was the first human to see them. She was not a soldier anymore, though she'd been one once. Her rank had been earned in the last war, the one that left half the Federation in ruins. She carried the ghosts of those battles in her eyes, which were gray like storm clouds about to break. But here, on this nameless excavation platform, she looked almost like a child seeing sunlight for the first time. "God," she whispered when the light hit the scales. "It's beautiful," the others agreed. The dragon's body stretched through the cavern like a mountain made of silver and shadow, wings folded over herself, claws buried deep in the earth. Her head rested on a ledge of stone, eyes closed, breath so slow it could have been mistaken for death. The scientists measured her size in kilometers, her mass in impossible numbers. They did not know her name. The records said there had once been 12. The 12 who burned the skies, who tore through fleets like paper and silenced entire worlds. The dragons had not been gods, but they had been close enough for most to kneel. When the last of the great wars ended, it was said the dragons vanished into the dark, taking their speech and their songs with them. None were ever seen again, until now. The Aurora's Folly sent its findings to the nearest relay. The transmission vanished into static. They sent another. Nothing. By the 3rd day they realized the system itself was isolated. Something, perhaps the dragon's presence, perhaps the planet's magnetic core, was interfering with their signal. They were alone, and Isla found that she didn't mind. Each night, she returned to the observation deck that overlooked the cavern. The dragon didn't move, but the air around her vibrated faintly, like a heartbeat too vast to fully register. The crew worked tirelessly, scanning, documenting, arguing over what to do. Some wanted to wake her. Others whispered that doing so would doom them all. But Isla felt something different when she looked at the creature. Not fear, not awe, something like sorrow. It was in the way the dragon's wings curled protectively inward, like a mother shielding something that was no longer there. It was in the way her claws pressed into the stone, as if anchoring herself to the world she refused to leave. Isla could almost imagine the dragon dreaming. And in those dreams, she thought, there must have been fire once. There must have been voices, and laughter, and the warmth of a sun that didn't yet know despair. On the 7th night, Isla stayed after the others left. The cavern was dark except for the soft hum of the generators. She approached the dragon's head, her boots crunching in the thin dust. The creature's scales caught the light like water, each one etched with faint runes, their meaning long forgotten. She reached out, not touching, not daring, but close enough to feel the faint heat radiating through the air. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said quietly. Her voice echoed, small in the vastness. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to understand." The dragon didn't move. Isla sighed. "They say your kind could burn stars, that you ended wars with a breath. But looking at you now, I think maybe all you ever wanted was peace." Something shifted. A tremor so slight she almost thought she'd imagined it. A gust of air rolled through the cavern, stirring her hair. For an instant she thought she saw one of the dragon's eyes flicker, just a spark of light beneath the lid. But it was gone before she could be sure. She stood there a long time, until the generators dimmed to conserve power, and the cavern sank into night. The next morning, the crew found every system on the ship fluctuating. Power surges, temperature shifts, static crawling through the comms. The scientists panicked. The engineers swore. Isla said nothing. When she went down to the cavern again, the dragon's eyes were open. They were vast and gold, deep as suns and older than anything that had ever looked back at her. Isla froze mid-step. The air itself seemed to hum around those eyes, thick with meaning her brain could barely hold. She tried to speak, but her voice died in her throat. The dragon looked at her, and then looked away. A sound like thunder slowed to a whisper filled the space. It wasn't words, not yet. It was the sound of a heartbeat older than galaxies. The slow inhale of something that had decided, for one brief moment, not to die. Isla exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. The dragon did not speak. For 3 days after that, she watched. The creature's gaze sometimes followed her, sometimes drifted away. It was not curiosity, it was weariness. The same kind Isla had seen in soldiers after too many battles, in refugees after too many losses, the kind that no sleep could cure. The crew began to argue openly. "We can't just leave it," said Dr. Leon, the exobiologist. "This is the find of 1,000 lifetimes. And if it wakes up and decides to finish what her kind started?" Another countered. "It hasn't harmed us yet," Isla said. "It's thinking," someone muttered. "You can feel it. It's deciding what to do with us." They weren't wrong. The dragon was thinking. The entire cavern pulsed faintly like the slow rhythm of a mind that spanned worlds. Isla could feel it at the edge of her awareness, brushing her thoughts, testing her shape like a wave rolling over stone. That night, she dreamed of fire, not the kind that burned flesh, but the kind that illuminated creation itself. In the dream, she saw the dragons, 12 of them, soaring through the void, weaving light between their wings, singing in voices that shaped suns. And at the center of it all was one, silver, vast, and bright beyond comprehension, whose song was softer than the rest, gentler. Her name was a melody without words, something that pulsed like the memory of dawn. Isla woke with tears on her face. She didn't know why. When she returned to the cavern, the dragon was watching her again. But this time, there was something different in her gaze. Recognition. Expectation. The hum in the air deepened, a tone so low, Isla felt it more than heard it. She knew instinctively what it meant. The dragon wanted something. A sound. A name. Isla didn't know why she knew. She only knew that the shape of it lingered in her dream like an echo. The melody had no translation. It wasn't a word, it was a feeling. She hesitated, then whispered it aloud. "Eleran," she said softly. The dragon froze. The world held its breath. Then came the sound. A voice like creation breaking open. A resonance that shook the dust from the cavern walls and set the stars above to trembling. The dragon spoke, and the universe seemed to lean closer to listen. "Who remembers me?" The words echoed through Isla's bones, filling her with light and grief all at once. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The air shimmered, heavy with the scent of lightning and rain. Isla raised her eyes. "I do," she whispered. "Or maybe I just was meant to." The dragon tilted her head, studying this fragile, defiant creature of blood and bone who had dared to speak her true name. And then, for the first time in 4 centuries, the last dragon smiled. The dragon's smile was not a thing made for comfort. It was vast and terrible, like the slow unfurling of a storm across the horizon. It didn't bear teeth, it bared truth. The light from her eyes flooded the cavern, painting every crack and rock in molten gold. For a moment, Isla thought she saw constellations spinning in that light, whole galaxies forming and collapsing in the span of a breath. The dragon's voice rumbled through the dust like the heartbeat of a dying star. "You speak what no one remembers," she said. The sound of her words wasn't carried by air, but by thought. They vibrated in Isla's chest, low and deep, like a note struck on some enormous instrument that resonated through bone and memory alike. "How does a child of ash know the name of fire?" Isla tried to answer, but her throat refused. The dragon's gaze pressed into her, vast and unrelenting. She felt as though her entire life were being read like a page. The memories of her childhood on Sol 9, the war she'd fought in, the people she'd lost, every scar and secret unfolded before those golden eyes. "I dreamed of you," Isla whispered at last. "I saw you in the dark." The dragon's pupils narrowed to slits, like a blade drawn through sunlight. "Dreams are echoes," she murmured, "and echoes are lies told by silence. You saw something that should not have remained." She lowered her head, scales grinding softly against the stone, until her eyes were level with Isla. "What do they call you, small voice?" "Isla," she said. The dragon tasted the name in the air, the syllables bending around her breath. "Isla, water and earth. Fragile names for fragile beings." She drew in a slow breath, and the air shivered. "Yet you wake what gods and monsters could not." The others had gathered by then, scientists, engineers, half afraid, half worshipping. Their instruments glowed weakly in the golden light, their faces pale. Dr. Leon stumbled forward, voice trembling. You can speak. You understand us?" The dragon turned her gaze toward him, and for an instant he stopped breathing. "I understand more than you ever will," she said. "I have listened to your species shout into the void for centuries, begging to be heard. You build towers of steel, call them ships, and think yourselves explorers. But you do not listen." Her gaze returned to Isla. Only this one listened. The air thrummed like the string of some ancient instrument. Isla's heart hammered in her chest. She felt every word reverberate through her body like it was meant only for her. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "To your kind?" The dragon's wings stirred, dust cascading like waterfalls of gold. "We sang creation into motion," she said. "Our breath birthed suns. Our voices carved the shapes of galaxies. For ages we tended the fires. But the younger species rose, hungry, frightened. They looked upon the dragons and saw not guardians, but rulers. And rulers must fall." Her tone deepened, bitter and resonant. "They came with weapons that stole the heat from our hearts. We fought until the stars bled. One by one my kin fell. Some turned to ash, others to silence. I alone refused both. I buried myself here, beneath a world that forgot its own name. And I waited for the universe to forget me." Isla felt the weight of that confession crush the air from her lungs. The silence that followed was immense, filled only by the hum of the dragon's breath and the faint whir of the crew's trembling equipment. "You waited for someone," Isla said softly. The dragon's eyes flickered, gold deepening to amber. "I waited for remembrance, not for flesh, not for voice, but for meaning. The cosmos grows dim when it is no longer remembered. You, human child, have brought me that light again. But I fear the price it will ask." Before Isla could speak, a violent shudder tore through the cavern. Alarms blared from the camp's consoles. The engineers shouted. The ground quaked, cracks racing across the stone like veins of lightning. "What's happening?" Isla yelled over the noise. Dr. Leon's voice cracked. "Energy surge, massive, coming from beneath her. Core destabilization." The dragon's wings unfurled in a single motion, a tidal wave of shadow and light. "They feel me," she said, her voice thunder now. "The old machines that sleep beneath this crust. They were forged to hold my kind. They have awakened." A low rumble deep in the planet answered her words, a sound like chains breaking, ancient and heavy. The walls of the cavern glowed faintly red, heat bleeding through the rock. "Everyone back to the ship," Isla ordered. But the dragon raised her head. "No, this world will not hold another prison. Go if you wish to live. But you, Isla, you must stay." The crew hesitated, terrified. Isla's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving you." "Then you will die with me," the dragon said simply. "I don't care." Isla shot back. I've already done enough dying. Something like a laugh escaped the dragon's chest, a sound half sorrow, half wonder. So human, she murmured. So beautifully foolish. The planet convulsed again. From the depths below, enormous spires of black metal began to rise, breaking through the surface like claws reaching for the sky. They were not natural. They pulsed with a rhythm, an intelligence. The dragon looked at them with something close to hate. The Forge Masters built these, she growled. Their machines were meant to drain our fire, to turn dragons into fuel for their weapons. They believed themselves gods once. And now? Isla asked. Now they are dust, but their toys remember their purpose. Bolts of red lightning arced across the chamber as the machinery woke fully, feeding on the planet's molten core. The air grew thick with static. The dragon rose to her full height, her wings unfurling until they brushed the cavern walls. The scale of her was incomprehensible. She was the shape of the sky itself. I will not be chained again, she thundered. She opened her mouth and light poured forth. Not fire, but pure, radiant energy. The kind that burned without heat. The beam struck the rising spires, melting metal into rivers of molten glass. The shockwave tore through the cavern, throwing Isla to the ground. Her ears rang, her vision filled with color and sound. When she staggered to her feet, the dragon was still glowing, her body threaded with cracks of light. You're killing yourself, Isla cried. I am ending what should have ended long ago. The cavern ceiling began to collapse. Slabs of rock falling in burning sheets. Isla ran toward the dragon's face, shielding her eyes from the light. There's another way. You don't have to destroy yourself. The dragon's gaze softened. There is no other way. The chains must be broken from within. But tell me, Isla, why do you care? You owe me nothing. Isla stared up at her, dust streaking her cheeks. Because we're both the last of something, she said. And because no one deserves to die alone. For a long, silent heartbeat, the dragon's eyes shimmered with something almost human. Then she bent her head closer, her breath like the wind before dawn. You spoke my true name, she said softly. So I will give you mine in return, the name you will carry when I am gone. She whispered a sound that was not a word but a feeling, a vibration that sank into Isla's bones, lodging itself behind her heart. It was a melody like gravity, pulling everything toward it. The last chain snapped. The ground heaved, the dragon reared back and unleashed her fire. This time the true fire, the light that birthed suns. It engulfed the machinery, the core, the world itself. Isla barely managed to dive into a collapsed tunnel as the blast tore through everything above. The world split open. When the light faded, silence fell. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and ash. Isla pulled herself from the rubble, coughing, half-deaf. The cavern was gone. The dragon was gone. The planet itself was splitting apart, its crust breaking into luminous shards. She stumbled to what had once been the observation ledge. In the distance, through the storm of debris, she saw her, the dragon, no longer bound to the ground, wings blazing with light. Her form was dissolving, becoming streaks of fire and starlight. But before she vanished entirely, she turned her gaze one last time to Isla. Her voice was faint now, more thought than sound. Remember, Isla of water and earth, the fire is yours now. And then she was gone. The shockwave lifted Isla off her feet, and everything went white. When she woke, she was aboard the Aurora's Folly, orbiting what was left of Vera Prime, a broken sphere glowing like a dying ember. The crew had survived somehow, pulled into orbit by the force of the explosion. Communications flickered back to life, relays chirping with signals from nearby systems. They said a wave of energy had washed across half the sector, reigniting dead stars and clearing radiation storms that had lingered for centuries. Dr. Leon said it was impossible. Isla said nothing. She stood alone at the viewport, watching the remnants of the planet drift apart. In the fading light, she could almost see a shape, a silhouette of wings spreading across the void. And in her chest, beneath the ache and exhaustion, something new burned quietly, like a coal that would never go out. The dragon's name pulsed there, alive and waiting. And somewhere far beyond the ruins, a voice whispered, soft and ancient and infinite, "The fire remembers." For weeks after the destruction of Vera Prime, the crew of the Aurora's Folly drifted through the scarred sector in uneasy silence. Repairs were slow, supplies low, tempers frayed. Half the system still sputtered from the shockwave that had nearly torn them apart. The sensors twitched with faint magnetic echoes, as if the ghost of the dragon still breathed through the vacuum. No one said her name aloud. No one except Isla. She would stand at the viewport each night, watching the fragments of the broken planet glimmer in the distance. They looked like scattered embers, cooling slowly, their glow fading. And yet sometimes one would flare, just for a heartbeat, as though something alive stirred within. Each time it happened, she felt the name burn beneath her ribs, the one the dragon had given her, thrumming like a pulse she couldn't quiet. Elaran. It wasn't the dragon's old name. No, that had been hers alone. This was different. A gift, a spark. Isla could not speak it without the air around her trembling faintly. She kept it secret from the crew. They already looked at her with wary eyes, whispering about how she had survived the blast, how she'd come back changed. In truth, she didn't know herself anymore. Her heartbeat no longer matched the ship's hum. It resonated deeper, slower. Sometimes, when she breathed, her breath left faint motes of light in the air. The first time Dr. Leon saw it, he froze. "Isla," he whispered. "What? What are you?" "Still human," she said, though her voice cracked on the word. "Just not entirely alone anymore." He didn't press her after that. The comms officer, young, nervous, always tapping on the console as if trying to keep rhythm with his own fear, reported strange signals, faint transmissions echoing across the void, old languages twisted by static, bursts of energy like flares that didn't match any known source. Isla listened to the recordings in silence. Beneath the noise, she heard something others couldn't. The ghost of a melody, a rhythm, a heartbeat. The dragon's song. One night, while the rest of the crew slept, Isla sat alone in the control deck, eyes fixed on the flickering holodisplay. She played the recordings again and again, letting the tones sink into her bones. Without thinking, she began to hum. Not a song she knew, but one that came unbidden, a thread of sound weaving itself through the static. The instruments responded. The screens brightened. The ship's engines gave a low answering pulse. And then, the stars shifted. The navigation array flared with impossible coordinates. The galaxy unfolded across the projection like a living map, lines of light connecting distant systems. At the intersections pulsed faint golden nodes, worlds touched by the energy wave that had followed Vera's destruction. The pattern wasn't random. It was deliberate, a trail. Isla stared at it, breath-catching. "You left me a path," she whispered. When the others awoke, she was already charting a course. The crew protested. They were supposed to return home, to file reports, to rest. But Isla couldn't shake the pull in her chest. "You didn't see what I saw," she told them. "That energy didn't just destroy a planet. It lit something up across the stars. Maybe it woke others. Maybe it woke her." They tried to reason with her, but the spark in her voice, calm, steady, unyielding, wasn't the kind that could be argued down. In the end, they followed, because humans always follow where the impossible leads. Their journey took them through systems long abandoned, through space so empty even light seemed to move cautiously. At first the path was faint, a shimmer, a resonance, but as they moved closer to the coordinates that burned brightest, the hum grew stronger. The ship's hull vibrated like a string plucked by unseen fingers. 3 weeks later, they arrived at a nebula that burned blue and gold, a swirling cradle of dust and lightning. Sensors screamed and died. Static filled the decks, and through it all came a sound, low, rhythmic, alive. The crew gathered at the viewport, awestruck. Drifting at the nebula's heart was something vast. Not a ship, not a planet, a shape made of fire and shadow, wings folded inward, body translucent, glowing with the pulse of stars. "It can't be," someone whispered. Isla closed her eyes. "It's her," she said, "or what's left of her." The dragon, Eleran, was not flesh anymore. She was energy, memory woven into plasma and light. Her presence filled the void with color, rippling through the nebula like a heartbeat through water. As the Aurora's folly drew closer, the hull temperature rose, though no heat registered. Instruments went wild, and then, as if acknowledging their approach, the dragon's vast head turned. Her eyes were still gold. The crew froze. Isla stepped forward, her breath trembling. "Eleran," she whispered. The dragon's form flickered, voice resonating through the hull. "You came." The words were softer now, almost gentle, as though carried by wind rather than force. The entire ship shuddered beneath their weight. "I thought you were gone," Isla said. "I am," the dragon replied. "And I am not. The fire does not die. It transforms. My flesh ended, but my song endures. It found refuge in you." Isla pressed her hand to her chest, where the faint warmth pulsed beneath her ribs. "I can feel it," she said. "Like you're still here." The dragon's wings unfurled, and the nebula blazed brighter. "Because you carry me, as you carry your own kind. The same stubborn flame that will not yield to the void." "What is this place?" Isla asked. "My memory," Eleran said. "My last breath became this nebula. The fire sought a home and the stars answered. But it cannot remain. It must spread." "Spread? There are others," Eleran said, her voice echoing faintly through the static of the dying sensors. "Not dragons, but remnants, embers of creation buried in worlds forgotten. They were silenced when we fell. But now the song stirs again. You can wake them." "Me?" Isla breathed. "I don't know how." "You already do," said the dragon. "You spoke a name no one remembered. You heard a melody that even the stars forgot. That is enough." The ship trembled, systems flickering, unable to handle the proximity to such energy. Eleran's form began to waver, pieces of her dissolving into light. "My time grows thin," she said. "The fire burns brightest when shared. I give you what remains." Before Isla could protest, the dragon's gaze fixed on her one last time. "Do not fear what you are becoming," she said. "You are the bridge between silence and song." Then the light surged. The Aurora's folly was engulfed. Every atom in its hull vibrated with unbearable resonance. The crew cried out, shielding their eyes as waves of light poured through the ship like liquid gold. Isla stood at the center of it, her arms outstretched, feeling the warmth flood through her veins. The dragon's voice rose, a final note so pure it shattered the air. And then, silence. When the glare faded, the nebula was gone. In its place was a field of quiet stars, newly lit, burning white and fierce. The ship drifted among them, intact but changed. Every console glowed with strange symbols. The engines hummed with power no one understood. The crew stared at Isla, who now stood calm in the middle of the bridge, eyes reflecting starlight. "Commander?" Dr. Leon said, voice trembling. "Are you—" "You? I think so," she said softly. "But she's still here, too. Not apart from me. With me." She looked out at the stars, and for the first time she saw threads of gold weaving between them. Lines of connection invisible to everyone else. They pulsed faintly, like veins carrying life between worlds. "She gave us a map," Isla said, "a way to wake what's sleeping." Over the next days, they tested the ship's systems. The engines could now cross light years in moments. The sensors read energies unknown to science. Every time Isla touched a console, the symbols shifted, as if the ship itself were alive, responding to her presence. She understood it instinctively, without words. They began to travel. Each world they reached was the same: dead, barren, forgotten. But when Isla sang the melody she'd carried from the dragon, the air would shimmer, the ground tremble, and something beneath would stir. Not dragons, no, but echoes of them. Crystalline structures that hummed with resonance, pools of light that rose like breath from the soil, fragments of the old fire waiting to be reborn. And wherever they went, the stars grew brighter. News spread slowly through human space. Reports of living suns, of ships returning from dead systems with light trailing in their wake. Some called it a miracle. Some called it a weapon. Governments demanded explanations. The Aurora's folly never answered. On the 23rd world, Isla found the first sign of the Forge Masters, the ancient builders who had enslaved the dragons. Their ruins still bled radiation, their machines half buried in dust. She stood among their silent towers and felt the old anger burn through her veins, an echo of Ilaran's rage. But beneath it, there was something else: understanding. They feared what they could not control, she said quietly. And in trying to own the fire, they killed it. Dr. Leon nodded. You think we'll do the same? Not if we remember, she said. Not if we learn that fire isn't something to cage. That night she dreamed again. She stood in darkness, surrounded by stars, and from the void rose Eleran's voice. Soft, almost human now. You walk the path well, she said. But the song must reach them all, even those who would rather burn than listen. Isla looked up. Will I see you again? You will see me every time a son is born, the dragon said. You carry the dawn now. When she woke, her chest glowed faintly beneath her shirt, the pulse of the fire steady and calm. The crew stared in awe but said nothing. They didn't need to. They followed her without question now, not out of duty, but faith. As the Aurora's folly cut through the quiet dark, Isla watched the stars ahead, each one a promise. Humanity had always reached for light, but never had it understood what that meant. To become it. Somewhere, deep in the galactic void, an empire stirred. Machines older than memory woke to the same energy wave, recognizing it. The Forge Master's last descendants were still out there, hidden and waiting. And when they looked at their sensors and saw the stars reigniting, they whispered in fear the name they'd hoped to erase forever. Eleran. Isla smiled faintly when she heard it on intercepted transmissions. Fear was a good start. Understanding would follow. Humans were good at that. They turned fear into wonder, wonder into creation. That was their fire, and she would teach the galaxy to see it burn again. The stars burned brighter with every passing week. What had begun as faint threads of gold stretching between systems had grown into radiant networks of light, visible even to the naked eye. Astronomers across human space called it the Veil Fire, believing it to be a natural phenomenon, a cosmic bloom. But those aboard the Aurora's folly knew better. They had watched it spread, had felt its pulse beneath their hull, had seen the dead world stir awake beneath Isla's song. It was not nature. It was memory, reborn through her voice. And yet with every light rekindled, something darker stirred in response. The Forge Master remnants had seen it too. Their transmissions grew more frequent, their fleets mobilizing at the edge of known space. They had once enslaved the dragons and drained their fire to forge their weapons of annihilation. The return of that light terrified them, because they understood its potential. The fire that created could also unmake, and humans were unpredictable. The Aurora's folly crossed into the Sol frontier on a course no one had dared to chart in generations. The ship was no longer what it had been. Its hull glowed faintly even in the dark, and its engines sang instead of roaring. The crew had long stopped questioning it. They had seen too much to cling to old science. They called the vessel the Waking Star now, half in reverence, half in disbelief. Isla sat alone in her cabin, the dim lights flickering with each beat of her heart. She no longer needed sleep as she once had. Instead, she drifted in half-dreams where Eleran's presence whispered like the tide, sometimes distant, sometimes near. Tonight, the voice came strong, laced with urgency. They come, Eleran said. I know, Isla whispered, her fingers tracing the glowing lines that had begun to form along her forearm, markings that shimmered like molten silver. I can feel them. They're afraid. Fear is the forge of choice, said the dragon. It shapes as easily as it destroys. What will you make of it? I don't want another war, Isla said, but they'll bring one to me. Then you must teach them what fire truly is. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in her cabin. She stood in the memory light of Eleran's realm, a field of starlit water beneath a sky of burning constellations. The dragon hovered above, wings vast and translucent, her eyes softer than Isla remembered. Why me? Isla asked quietly, "Why choose a human?" "Because you still remember what it means to hope," Eleron said. "My kind forgot. We grew too vast, too certain. We saw only eternity and lost the beauty of the moment. You? Your species. You burn so fast, but you shine." "I don't feel like I'm shining," Isla said with a weak laugh. "You will," the dragon murmured. "The song is almost complete. When the Forge Masters arrive, you must finish it." "Finish it how?" Eleron smiled, and for the first time Isla saw something like peace in her face. "You will know when you stop thinking and start being. The fire will do the rest." The dream dissolved like smoke, and Isla woke to alarms blaring through the ship. The Forge Masters had arrived. The main display flickered with the image of a fleet, massive black vessels drifting at the edge of the system, their forms sharp and predatory, powered by cores that pulsed with artificial suns. They were beautiful in their cruelty, precision forged into purpose. The comms crackled. "Unidentified vessel," came a voice, deep and metallic. "You are in violation of Forge Master claim space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." The crew stared at Isla, waiting. She rose slowly, the glow beneath her skin brightening until her shadow shimmered on the walls. "No," she said. The communications officer hesitated. "Commander? We're not surrendering," Isla said. "We've come too far to kneel to the dark." The fleet advanced, engines flaring. The Aurora's Folly trembled under the energy wash. Isla stepped forward, eyes closed, and placed her hand on the main console. The ship responded instantly. The hum deepened, lights brightened, the hull vibrating with resonance. When she spoke, her voice carried not just through the speakers, but through the very fabric of the void. "I am Isla Wren of Sol, and I speak for the fire that remembers." For a moment, silence. Then a low laugh echoed across the comms. "You are nothing," the Forge Master voice sneered. "A child playing with the ashes of gods." Isla smiled faintly. "Maybe, but you've forgotten what ashes can do." She began to hum. The note was low, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew, layer by layer, harmonizing with the ship's vibration until the very stars seemed to pulse to its rhythm. The Forge Master ships opened fire, lances of red energy tearing through space, but the beams struck an invisible field and dissolved into streams of light. The crew watched in awe as their vessel shone brighter, wings of luminescence unfolding from its hull like a living thing. The hum became song. It wasn't words, it was memory, of creation, of suns being born, of dragons singing stars into existence, and woven through it was humanity's voice, defiant, tender, unyielding. The song spread outward, rippling through the Forge Master fleet. Their weapons faltered. Their cores flickered. In the heart of the flagship, ancient minds screamed as their systems began to burn with unfamiliar resonance. They tried to calculate it, to contain it, but the fire wasn't physics. It was meaning. The very idea of what they had feared to feel. "You built cages for the stars," Isla said softly. "But we built stories, and stories don't die." The fire leapt from ship to ship, threads of gold weaving through the darkness. The Forge Master vessels bloomed with light, their black hulls cracking, their energy spilling into the void like the petals of dying suns. One by one they fell silent, not destroyed but unbound. The power that had enslaved dragons for millennia was undone by a human voice that dared to sing. When it was over, the stars were quiet again. The nebulae glowed faintly in the distance. The crew stood in stunned silence, tears streaming down faces that barely understood what they had witnessed. Dr. Leon approached Isla slowly. You ended them." "No," she said, her eyes far away. "I freed them. Just as she freed me." She turned to the viewport, where the remnants of the Forge Master fleet drifted like dust, their light fading into the star field. In the reflection, she thought she saw wings behind her, vast and golden, just for a heartbeat. That night, the Aurora's Folly fell quiet. The crew rested for the first time in months, wrapped in the soft hum of the ship's new heartbeat. Isla stayed awake, watching the stars, Eleran's voice came to her one last time. "You did well," she said, her tone warm and fading. "Is it over?" Isla asked. "For now," said the dragon. "But the fire never truly ends. It travels, it grows. You've reminded the galaxy what it means to breathe again." "I'll miss you," Isla whispered. "You will not need to. I am in the light you kindle, in the stories your kind will tell. You are the last flame of the first dawn, Isla of water and earth. You have made even dragons remember why they sang." Her voice faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the cosmos. The following days blurred into motion. The Aurora's Folly, or whatever it had become, moved between systems at will now, its engines driven by something beyond fuel. Each time they arrived in a new place, they found life stirring. Planets long dormant reawakening, ecosystems blooming under newborn suns. The crew recorded what they could, but they understood this was no longer about science. It was something greater, something human. Word of Isla's deeds spread, at first through rumor, then through certainty. They called her many things: the Star Singer, the Flame Keeper, the Last Dragon's Heir. Some feared her, some worshipped her, some simply listened. Humanity began to change. They built not weapons, but instruments tuned to the frequencies she had sung. They called them resonance beacons, and they seeded them across the stars. Each beacon carried her song forward. Decades passed, though Isla did not age as others did. The fire within her burned too brightly for time to touch. She wandered from world to world, teaching those who wished to learn the old melody. The dragons did not return in flesh, but their essence lived on in the light that connected everything, the golden lattice stretching from one horizon to another. Sometimes she stood alone on the surface of new worlds, barefoot in the dust, listening to the hum of creation growing louder. And sometimes, in the distance, she swore she saw the shadow of wings crossing the sun. When at last her journey neared its end, she returned to the place where it had begun. The fragments of Vera Prime, now cooled and blooming with life. Forests grew between the shards. Rivers of light flowed where magma once ran. She sat by a lake that reflected the stars and whispered into the wind. Eleran. The name rippled across the water, shimmering with warmth. A shape rose in the reflection. A great silver dragon, half light, half memory, smiling softly. "You kept your promise," Eleran said. "So did you," Isla answered. They watched the sunrise together, a quiet moment between legend and eternity. The sky burned gold, and for the first time, Isla felt something like peace settle into her bones. "Will they remember us?" she asked. Eleran's laughter was gentle, like wind through leaves. "They will remember you, and through you, all of us. That is the gift of your kind. You do not just survive, you remember. You make meaning of the ashes." Isla closed her eyes. "Then maybe it's time I rest." "Rest," said the dragon, lowering her head, "and dream. The fire will tend itself." As the light grew, Isla's body dissolved into motes of gold, her breath merging with the air, her voice carried by the wind. The fire within her lifted from the earth, rising into the dawn. Across the galaxy, the resonance beacons pulsed once more. Ships paused, planets looked to the sky, and for a brief, impossible instant, the entire Milky Way seemed to sing, a song of rebirth, of courage, of remembrance. And somewhere within that vast harmony, the last dragon's voice joined once more with a human's, echoing across eternity. The galaxy would tell the story for millennia to come, how the last dragon refused to speak until a human whispered her true name, and how, because of that whisper, the stars themselves remembered how to shine.